The Portland Trailblazers have the team to become a Western Conference legitimate contender within the next 3 to 5 years, and they have a chance to make the playoffs this year. When trading Damian Lillard only a few weeks ago to the Milwaukee Bucks, they got a huge haul in return. When they traded Lillard, they got Jrue Holiday, DeAndre Ayton, a first-round pick, and 2 first-round pick swaps. After that, they traded Jrue Holiday to the Boston Celtics for Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams III, and 2 first-round picks. They ended up with 3 very solid players, 3 first-round picks, and 2 pick swaps, which is honestly more than they could have imagined. Now, they have a starting lineup of Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe, Jeremy Grant, and DeAndre Ayton, with Malcolm Brogdon, Matisse Thybulle, and Robert Williams off the bench. Scoot Henderson might be the most underrated third overall pick in NBA history because he came into the league with Victor Wembanyama in the same draft class. Vic was obviously going to be the number 1 overall pick. There was no doubt about it. And it was a little bit baffling to me that Charlotte took Brandon Miller above Scoot Henderson because I do believe that Scoot is a much better prospect and he was a consensus number 2 overall pick, and it was a little bit surprising when Michael Jordan ended up taking Brandon Miller ahead of him. But I do believe that Scoot Henderson is the second best player in this draft class, and I think it's a lot closer than people might believe. And when you pair him with a guy in DeAndre Ayton, who was a first overall pick only a few years ago in 2018, I think that this could be a very solid team. Their bench of Robin Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, and Matisse Thybulle is a very solid bench, and all 3 of those guys have been starters at some point in their careers. They also have Jeremy Grant, a solid veteran who's going to provide some leadership for the young guys on this team. And they have, as their wings, they have Anthony Simons and Shaedon Sharpe, who are very solid. Anthony Simons has been a solid player for the Blazers for a while and played alongside Damian Lillard when he was still in town. So, honestly, when you have a guy in Scoot Henderson who could become a future All-NBA player, and I can see resemblances of Russell Westbrook and his athleticism and his strength early in his career, but I do believe that Scoot Henderson shoots the ball a lot better. So with this all being said, I think that this team is the best team that the Portland Trailblazers have had in the last 10 years. Damian Lillard obviously put them into the playoffs every single year, but this is the most well-rounded team that the Blazers have had in a long time. They have 8 guys who could legitimately start for them this year, and I think that this team could compete for the number 6 through 8 seed in the Western Conference. If they get somewhere between 7, 8, 9, and 10 and get into the play-in, they will definitely make a push to get an actual playoff spot, and I do believe that they will give any team that they face in the first round of the playoffs a lot of trouble. If I'm a team that is at the top of the Western Conference, I do not want to play Portland in the playoffs. Sure, Scoot Henderson is going to be very raw as a rookie, and he still has some things he needs to work on in his game, like shooting the ball consistently from 3. But you also have a guy in Anthony Simons who scored 21.1 points per game last year on 37% shooting from 3, which is much above league average, and has shot 40% in his rookie year a couple of years ago. So he's a career 38.7% shooting the ball from 3. And this is much above league average. And you have Shaedon Sharpe, who's also a solid player and continues to develop. You have Matisse Thybulle, who's very good defensively. You have DeAndre Ayton and Jeremy Grant, who are solid big men inside defensively. And Robert Williams, who is an improving defender if he can stay on the court. One thing that I love about Robert Williams and the pickup of him by the Blazers is that he won't have to shoulder so much of a load defensively and won't have to play as heavy minutes. One thing that has been of a detriment about him is that he hasn't been able to stay on the court. And now he'll have kind of a rotation at the big man position with DeAndre Ayton and Jeremy Grant. You could have DeAndre Ayton and Robert Williams on the court at the same time. You could have Jeremy Grant and Robert Williams on the court at the same time. And you could have Jeremy Grant and DeAndre Ayton on the court at the same time as well. And the Blazers haven't had this kind of big man depth in a very long time. Yusuf Nurkic was a solid big man last year to pair alongside Jeremy Grant, but I don't know if I see Nurkic as the top center that DeAndre Ayton could be. DeAndre Ayton is obviously a much better player than Nurkic was, and when you throw in a guy like Robert Williams who could come off the bench and give you 20 to 30 minutes of solid defensive production and is an elite lob threat, I really do believe that the Blazers have the most well-rounded front court that they've had in years. Now, we have to see what Ayton will become in Portland, because in Phoenix, he was a solid player, put up good stats, could give you a double-double on any given night, but we'll have to see how he plays when he is not surrounded by a Kevin Durant, a Chris Paul, and a Devin Booker. But I also think that he could be a lot more effective because he's a lot happier to be out of Phoenix. He has voiced displeasure in being in Phoenix for a while now. Before last season, when he did not get traded, he was trying to go to, I believe, Indiana. And when Phoenix matched his offer sheet as a restricted free agent, he looked actually sad to be back in Phoenix. So now that he has a new start somewhere else, I think that he could be really, really, really good. He's averaged a double-double in the last couple seasons and has shot around 60% for his career. He's a career 16.7 point per game scorer, as well as 10 rebounds. And I honestly think that he could develop into being a top 5 to 7 big man in the NBA. So you pair that with Scoot Henderson, who I believe is going to be a future All-NBA player, and you have a very solid future for the Portland Trail Blazers, because DeAndre Ayton is still very young. He's only 25 years old and just turned 25 years old. So he still has a number of quality years left in him. And when you give him the more of a role in the offense and you allow him to play within a different system than in Phoenix, he could be very dangerous. And Scoot Henderson obviously is young. Anthony Simons is young. Shaedon Sharpe is young. And Malcolm Brogdon is even fairly young as well. Malcolm Brogdon is so underlooked when he was on the Boston Celtics. He was an all-defensive team candidate and was a very solid defender and scorer for them, and started a number of games for them last year as well. So for him to be on their bench and not even starting for them, he'll be a very lethal player for them off the bench. And him and Robert Williams obviously have a lot of chemistry after playing on the Celtics together. So if they're running the bench unit together, I can only imagine how lethal that chemistry will be, especially when you put a guy like Matisse Thybulle, who doesn't need a lot of shots and can just go out and play defense and give you solid defensive minutes. I'm very optimistic about this team, and I'm not going to say that they're going to be better than they were with Dame, because obviously Damian Lillard is a top 10 player in the NBA, but I'm going to say this: within the next 3 years, they could make a deep playoff run, just because I think that they're going to develop very quickly. Scoot has the characteristics to be a solid NBA player. He already has the strength and the athleticism and has worked on his jump shot a lot. And I do believe that with a little bit more fine-tuning in his jump shot, he could become at worst, league average three-point shooter. He has a very solid mid-range game, and you can't really say that about a lot of guys coming out of college, and the mid-range has become a very lost art. So for him to have a solid mid-range is a very crucial skill. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this team can kind of mesh together. It might take a few games. It'll probably take a couple months for them to actually mesh together, but I'm going to say this: if they get into the playoffs, watch out for an upset. I think that even the way that Minnesota gave Denver a run for their money when Denver was a 1 seed a couple of years ago, I think that this team could give a 1 seed, a 2 seed, a 3 seed a very big run for their money. And I think that they could actually take a legit playoff spot and not even a play-in spot this season coming up. I think they could go grab a 6 seed, and I think that their future is very, very, very bright. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how they perform this year, how Scoot develops. I think that Scoot Henderson could be a 18 point per game scorer with about 6.5 assists per game. I think that Anthony Simons could take the next step of his development, averaging about maybe 23 points a game. And DeAndre Ayton I think he could be a 20 point, 10 rebound a game guy for this team. The pick and roll between Scoot Henderson and DeAndre Ayton will be absolutely lethal, and you don't want to see Scoot Henderson coming down the lane at you, because that is a big man and a very strong point guard. So I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of what happens with this team, and don't be surprised if in April and May, and maybe not June, but in April and May, they could be making a lot of noise in the NBA and in the Western Conference. Anyways, God bless you all. I hope you have an amazing day. Make sure to subscribe to the channel because I'm trying to hit 500 subscribers by Christmas time. So make sure to help me out with that. God bless you all.